Alright, due to popular demand, we're going to be talking again about the Mercedes R230 cluster. These were made 03 to 08. And right off the bat, I am going to cover two of the most important things you need to know about our screens. First, you'll receive a package that looks something like this. It'll have our QR code, which is a video linked to this video. And then we do have two different versions. We have an 03 and 04 version, which is optimized for the 0304. And then the 05 to 08 LCD set, which is for the 05 to 08. So most important, number one thing, all of our LCDs have film protecting the glass. This is a very common thing. People install them and say, well, there's a glare reflection. Well, you didn't remove the film. So you need to remove the film on both sides of the screen once you have it installed, so you don't want to get fingerprints, smudges, any kind of scratches on it before you actually get it in the cluster. So next, second most important thing is, how do you know if you have an 03, 04, or 05 to 08? Well, if your car is an 03, 04, chances are it has an 03, 04. However, if the cluster was replaced at any point in time, you might have a newer cluster. So I'll show you here the easiest way to figure that out. So right here on the back, you'll see this left cutout. There's a QR code sticker on the 05 to 08 version. And then on the right side, you can see these pads are like a gold color. And then the layout of the pads is different from the 03 to 04. So if you have this cluster in your 03 and 04, you'll need to buy our 05 and up LCDs. So here, just as an example, we have an older 03, 04 cluster right here. You see there is no QR code on the left. The pads are silver, not gold. And then the pads on the right are entirely different from the later models. Good news is, if you buy an 05 to 08 LCD set, you can still install them into your 03 to 04. But if you have an 05 to 08, you must buy the 05 to 08 LCDs. If you do not, the LCDs will appear all white. That's a good indication that you have an older style LCD screen in your newer style cluster. So, with that out of the way, let's get into how these clusters kind of work and things you need to know. A lot of people mention tips and different ways of installing things. Here we actually picked up an AMG version. This one is kilometers an hour. This one came from Canada, and as you can see, the screens are quite bad on this one. So we might refurbish this one, put new screens in it, and then sell it, because I'm sure someone would want this cluster in Canada or elsewhere that utilizes the KPH. And then a quick check. Obviously you can see the QR sticker, the gold pins, tells you it's an 05 to 08. A lot of times searching for these part numbers don't really give you a good idea of what it is. A lot of sellers will just sell these as 03 to 08. And then a lot of times it's hard to get information on these part numbers, what exactly it fits, because there are so many different sources of information, conflicting information, eBay sellers, internet sellers, etc., that just don't really know what they have, and they don't really know what they're selling. I don't know what the differences are with the 05 to 08 clusters, if there's any improvements, longevity, things of that nature, or what you need to do to get an 05 to 08 working in your 03 to 04. I don't even know if it's possible. According to the sellers, though, you can. I don't know what programming is needed with MB Star or any diagnostic things, or Autel and all those scanners, Snap-on, etc. Typically the mileage is stored in the cluster, it sometimes also links up with the ICE module or the ECU, depending upon the model. So if you put in a different cluster, two problems that could happen are either with the immobilizer, your key won't work, or the mileage shows dashes on some Mercedes models. Again, I don't know if it's applicable to this one or not, but keep that in mind when you're buying a used cluster. So let me just power this one on so you can see what's going on here. Alright, visit workshop. One important thing to notice, you'll see in a second here, it says display malfunction, visit workshop. Now another thing we hear all the time is, well, the cluster said the display is bad, so that must mean your screens are bad. Or if the screens are failing, the cluster somehow knows that the screens are going bad. That's not true at all. I don't know why Mercedes says display malfunction. It's kind of misleading, and there's probably some kind of translation issue from German to English. I don't really know the answer. Maybe somebody out there does. So the lens is easy to pop off. There's just some tabs, so I'm not really going to go through that in this portion of the video. What I will go through is just more common questions we get and concerns from customers. So the gauges you'll feel have a little bit of not resistance, but there's just like layers to the movement, if that makes sense. So if you go down to 0 here, you'll feel it stops pretty much at 0, but if you want to wind it clockwise, you'll feel there's just kind of resistance points as you rotate the dial. So see, you can kind of wiggle it past that point and then wiggle it past that point, but it's not smooth, and that's normal. Don't worry if you feel it's jerky. You don't need new stepper motors or anything like that. So when you power on the cluster, the gauges will always return back to 0. It's kind of a default thing that it does. And then when you get to this point, now before we even take the cluster apart, I'm going to mention something that somebody else said. They said that you could somehow slide the LCD out without taking the cluster apart. I'm not sure if that's possible or not. But let me get this to a point where I can easily show this to everybody. First, so after you take the lens off, next you gotta get this back plastic portion off. So I'll get that off camera, and then I'll return and then show you how to do that exactly. Alright, we've got the cluster separated. As you can see, there are small white tabs around the perimeter of the housing here, and these tabs hold this assembly in the white portion. So you will need to equally bend these tabs carefully with a pick or flathead screwdriver while pushing this assembly outward. So outward pressure, and then just work the tabs as you go along. So like I said, you can either do it this way with a flathead, kind of pry up, or use a hook tool of some sort or a pick to hold it, and then release the cluster from that specific tab. So there are no screws in an effort to cut costs. A lot of times manufacturers don't use screws, they'll just use clips and tabs and things of that nature. So once we get here, you'll see that you can, in fact, kind of separate this top overlay portion to get some space. So it might be possible to lift the LCD out that way, but you're far enough into the process that you might as well just do it correctly so you don't break anything or anything like that. So the next step is we want to mark these needles. This is another comment we get. Well, what do you mean mark the needles? Where do you mark them? So just rotate them counterclockwise to the stopping point. You'll feel very sturdily stopping point where it doesn't want to go down counterclockwise anymore. And then we like to put a piece of like painter's tape or something under the needle and then just mark it right at that exact spot. so that when you put the needle back on, you can turn it to that exact marked point. So I know that these are all resting at 0, essentially, and we've done enough of these that I don't need to mark them for the purpose of this video, but you might want to do that. This one's a little tricky because there is no 0, it's just kind of below 40. So for the purpose of the video, I will go ahead and mark this for you guys so you know what I'm talking about. So we're going to move that down there, and assuming I can find some type of pen or marking device, or worst case scenario, a highlighter, a yellow highlighter on blue tape, that's always fantastic. That's just to let you know where that needle needs to go. And then at this point you can turn them all counterclockwise while pulling upwards. That will release the needles from the motors internally, and they'll come off pretty easily. There's no tools needed. You don't really need much force. They'll all come off. So with the needles out, I will then I'll separate the circuit board from the top housing and then come back on the next part and show you exactly what I did. But it's going to be similar to the other housing where there's these little plastic retainers, like here, and here's another one, and here's another one. And then eventually you loosen them all to a point where it's free from the circuit board. But before you do that, you need to release these ribbons. So you need your pick or a flathead again to gently lift up each side of this plastic, very, very delicate plastic clip. So these like to get in there pretty tight over time and don't want to release, so you might actually need a flathead for this. And very, very, very carefully, very gently lift up. You'll feel it release. Do not overextend it, because if you break this, you're pretty much dead in the water. You're going to need a lot of labor to replace the entire connector if you break this bad enough. Once you do that, the ribbon will release from the connector. You'll hear it and you'll kind of feel it start to resist. It's literally, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch, if that, 1/8 of an inch maybe. So we release those. And then if you don't release it all the way, the LCD ribbon will not come out, so you might have to work them back and forth 1 or 2 times just to ensure that it's fully released. And sometimes the LCD ribbon likes to stick in there as well. So that's a common thing. Okay. So once we got that out and the LCD is released, then this should... Oh, we got to release the side ones as well, like so, left and right, same thing, just a little plastic clip, 2 plastic clips, and we've got release. 2 parts. Circuit board can go aside. I'll just show you how delicate these clips are here. So you'll see if this top portion separates or breaks, you have to desolder this entire row of pins, and you also need to find another ribbon connector here, LCD connector, which you can only get from another cluster, so then you're buying another cluster. So very quickly you could destroy your entire operation here and your ego and everything. So very gently, like I said, and then when you put the LCD ribbon back in, you just push the retainer down and it locks it in. Okay, Another thing we have heard was that there's some confusion about which way these go in. You'll see like a chip on one side and then nothing on the other. So we'll kind of go over which side goes where in the next part. But for now, let me put this aside and we're working on this. So now we need to separate the overlay from the plastic so we can access the LCDs. So I'll get that separated and then show you exactly what I did, and then we can go to replacing the LCDs. Alright, we've separated the overlay. This just pops right off. And then this section, there are two, potentially three tabs, one on top and then one on each side. Quite a bit easier than the first part. Just this tiny little retainer tab. Just bend this thing right here out of the way, and then it'll just kind of pop out. And the same down here, there's one, and then over here. Very easy. And then just keep these together. In case you want to wipe off any dust or anything, be careful not to get fingerprints on these because they're pretty difficult to get off. Grease marks and whatever else. So we'll leave those there. Now here's the LCDs. You'll see there's two tabs on top, and very easy, push the LCD up. That will depress these two tabs, and then you can remove the LCD straight out, just like that. Now be careful because you'll see these metal tabs are up. If you grab our LCDs, they naturally bend down the wrong way. So you'll see there's no metal, and then you'll see on this side there are metal leads right there. So this is the side that has to face up. Because when you bend it around and plug it into the cluster, that's how it's going to go. So this is our 0304 LCD, so you'll kind of see what happens here if you accidentally install this in an 05 and up cluster. So very easy, just grab the top or the bottom two corners and then push the LCD in and then down, and it'll hold it in there. Just like so. Same with this side. Push up and then out. And I'm going to grab one of our 05 to 08 LCDs on this side. So you'll see the metal side is up, and the metal right there, very important. And then let's see here. I'm just going to set this loosely on top like so. And fold this over by hand and insert into the connector, which could be more difficult than you might think, as this retainer might get pushed down and then that will prevent the ribbon from getting inserted. You'll know when it's all the way in because it'll just essentially stop. And then again, you want to go back and forth and push this down on either side. If you just push one side, it's going to kind of close it at an angle, and it's not going to work. It's not going to contact it where it needs to. And then you might not have a non-working screen. So, same with this one. These can be tricky, like I mentioned. You can use a tool or something to make sure this goes straight up and down, if that helps you. And when you push it in flush, also the contact pads won't, you probably won't see them anymore. That's how you know it's all the way in. And very quickly before my battery dies, let's power this on. Let's see how this looks. Alright, you've got the white screen on the right, just like I mentioned, and then you have the good screen on the left. So 0304 screen is going to show just like that on an 05 to 08. It's a voltage discrepancy between the years, and this is why we just have two different versions of the screen to optimize to each of the clusters and how they're delivering power to the LCDs. So that's really it. If you have any other questions, we will cover them, but that pretty much covers everything here. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of covered all the issues, the questions that came up with people. Just take your time. It's easy. You don't need any crazy tools. Like I did this whole thing with a tiny screwdriver and a pick. You know, have an anti-static mat. If you want to go crazy, you can put a wrist strap on for static. But we've never had issues just, you know, doing it without that. As long as you're not on carpet or rolling around creating static electricity, you should be fine. If you're asking how to make this plug, we don't give out this information because it costs us a lot of money every month for the wiring diagrams and everything else. My suggestion would be contact us. We can sell you a wiring diagram or even a plug in certain cases if that's what you'd like. But you can just plug this back into your vehicle. I mean, you have the car. It's very easy just to plug it back in like this, make sure everything works before you put everything back together. So, again, the 03 to 04 screen is on the right, does not work in 05 and up. 05 to 08 works in 05 to 08. It also works backwards in the 03 and 04s. So, thanks for watching. I hope this cleared up a lot of issues and questions people have been having with these. And take care.